All right, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight to the Sugar House Community Council meeting. We have a full agenda, so we're just going to get right to it. Again, because of restrictions, we're going to do all questions in the chat. And just reminder to be civil in the chat as well. Just be an adult. Let's do a couple of updates. So congrats to Jeremy Higginson for sitting at the table tonight. He's the new Garfield trustee. Mindy Smith couldn't make it, but she runs family support at Highland High School. And she wanted me to just thank everybody for what they've done over the past year. Their Sub for Santa kicked off, I think today, and they're looking really for anything, food, clothing, supplies, money. The link we put in the chat, if anybody wants to write that down. They're also having a kind of a Chick-fil-A's thanking Highland High tomorrow at 3:30 if anybody wants to make it down there. They've been really supportive of everything at Highland. I'm going to unmute Jeremy Chatterton real quick. Jerry, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Do you have anything to say? Jeremy Chatterton's the principal of Highland.
No, I mean, I really just, Mindy's fantastic. Our Sub for Santa program is going on now, as you just mentioned. I know I'm hoping the link you put in there was based on the Amazon wish list that Mindy's kind of put together for items that people need. But any help would be greatly appreciated. School year's off to a great start. We're getting through the Thanksgiving break. If any of you have questions or concerns or anything about what's happening at Highland or anything with our students, please let me know, and I'd be happy to address or answer any of those.
Hey, Jared, can you put the links in the chat for us? Do you have those?
Yeah, I will find them. I'm sorry,
Okay.
I don't know, my camera's not working, but yes, I will.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, thanks. Let's go to Mike Bagley with the Treasury Report. Go ahead, Mike.
Hi, everyone. Good to be here. Thanks for showing up. So not a whole lot of activity in December. Our U.S. bank balance sits at $7,541.94 as of 10 minutes ago. And let's see, we had our annual expense for the upkeep of our website. So and I noticed that's an agenda item tonight too, so maybe we'll learn more. But anyways, that's $855 is what we paid for, should be a year. And then we received a donation through our PayPal account. So that balance is at $48.51. So thanks for the generous donations. And just be thinking about donations as we come to the end of the year. I know it's a time when people are thinking about, I don't know what they call it, like Giving Tuesday or something like that, or Cyber Tuesday. But anyways, as far as tax year's coming to a close. So if you haven't had an opportunity to donate to the community council, we would love your generosity and your support. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Mike. We're going to go. So Bob Norgard's going to join us here in a little while. So we're going to go to Tim Cosgrove. Tim's the mayor's liaison for District 7. Go ahead, Tim.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I just, I wasn't quite sure what to talk about this month, but I read Landon's newsletter, and holy cow, if you want information, go to that newsletter. That's where I was getting all my information from. But I just
Brandon does it, Tim. Brandon does it.
Oh, Brandon, okay. You guys do a great job. It was wonderful. So I just wanted to give a shout out and really appreciate the good work that Sugar House does. There were a couple things. Jamie Stokes from our office asked me to give a reminder about the mayor's micro grant. At the end of the year, we tabulate and get those receipts, and it helps us to plan for the next year with what projects we need to prioritize. So those are due December 31st into Jamie Stokes. Let's see, Landon wanted me to touch briefly on the CIP funding update. And I always have to try to look at this without going cross-eyed, because we're talking about fiscal year 2023 now. And so it's planning out. I can't even believe it's December 1st of 2021. We're here in December already. But just giving a quick brief update, I know fiscal year 2022, Sugar House had the two projects, the Sugar House Park Pavilion removal and replacement, and the Safe Side Street study. And both of those were funded. Those have been forwarded to the different departments and divisions for further vetting and implementation. And I think that incorporated transportation, engineering, parks, and public lands. And so they're working on coordinating the timing for the implementation of that. The 2023 fiscal year process and the request for CIP funding that Sugar House had on the Safe Side Streets Part 2 and the Sugar House crosswalk murals. So those are currently with the different departments, and the city staff are using their areas of expertise to put together the cost estimates that would incur for moving forward on those projects. Those processes have to be finalized by the end of December of this year. And afterwards, after those applications are presented to the Community Development Capital Improvement Program Board in the end of February, beginning of March, the board recommendations are forwarded to the mayor in April. And then the mayor will make her recommendations, and then that goes to the city council in May before the fiscal year new budget in the end of June, beginning of July. So I'll put that timeline in the chat, and you can look at that. That kind of helps give a better visualization for the CIP funding and where those projects are at. I was also asked by one of our transportation engineers, Joe Taylor, to remind everybody to please participate in the Transportation Master Plan Community Values and Priorities Survey. They've been working on this for a while, but it's your opportunity to weigh in and share what your priorities are and what you'd like to see the city do and where we'd like to grow and manage growth. And there's also an urban forest action plan, and I'll put that in the link. And then last but not least, the mayor is also doing a warm winter clothing drive with Volunteers of America. December 11th, Saturday, December 11th. I have to look at my calendar. From 11 to 3, it's at the City County building on the east side. All you have to do is pull your car up through the horseshoe. We'll be out there collecting the donations to drop them off. And I'll put that information also in the chat.
Hey, Tim, and I think she's coming here in February. Is that right?
February, yes. The mayor's coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, Landon. Thanks for having me.
Hey, safe travels.
Tried to keep it short and sweet. Thank you.
All right, Brandon, go ahead.
We were hoping to have Rachel from Coffee Mama on tonight as the spotlight on business, but we don't see her yet. So I thought I would take a minute to let everyone know that the Chamber holiday party is December 15th at 6 p.m. over at Wasatch, right on the corner of Highland and 21st. If you're a business owner or have anything to do with the business community or want to have anything to do with the business community, I'm going to put a link to register. Oh, Dana beat me to it. Thank you, Dana. Please feel free to register. We're looking to raise funds for us to continue to do some of the things that we've been doing for the last year and a half, such as the Sugar House Strong campaign, which many of you are well aware of. The partnership with Local First Utah, which we're starting to pick up a lot of momentum, offering educational courses to business owners in the area. And in general, if you just want to get to know some of the local business owners and managers in the area, please take a moment to get some tickets. +1s are encouraged. But we've only got about another few days to get our numbers to Wasatch. So if you are interested, act soon.
All right.
Oh yeah, thanks, Erica. We're also looking for people or businesses who want to donate to our raffle that we're going to be doing at the event. So if you're interested in providing something, please reach out to Erica, myself, Dana, and we can get in contact with you.
All right, thanks. All right, Sarah, go ahead. Hold on, you're muted.
Thank you, Landon. Hey, Sarah, we'll see you with Friends of Fairmount Park. Just wanted to get something on the new year calendar for folks. We're going to have on January 11th, Cat, let's see, how do I say her name? Buse. Let's see, no, Mouse, Cat Mouse or Moss, Public Lands Planner, to talk about upgrades to restrooms. We're interested in advancing the usability, cleanliness, friendliness of Fairmount Park bathrooms, and we'd like to hear about innovations that are being done across the US, internationally, and the city. So if you're interested, I'll put registration in the chat for a Zoom. Please come January 11th, 7 to 8 p.m. And sorry, George, I think it might conflict with the Salt Lake Community Council meeting, but 7 to 8 on January 11th. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Landon.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, we're flying. Let's go to Andrew Johnston. So Andrew's the Director of Homeless Policy and Outreach. We'll take all questions for him in the chat, like we said earlier, and he's just going to present. You ready, Andrew?
Yeah, I hope so. I'm going to try and share my screen if that's okay.
Sure.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Andrew Johnston. I've been with the mayor's office since May of this year as the Director of Homelessness Policy and Outreach. And prior to that, I was on the City Council representing District 2 for 5 years. My day job for a number of years has been with Volunteers of America, Utah. I'm a social worker by training. I have a master's in social work, and I've been working in and out of homelessness and substance use and mental health for 20 some odd years. So that's what interested me in taking the role at the city and trying to help the city coordinate with the other entities who are working on homelessness, since this is a regional, state, and really a Western U.S. Problem, if not entire U.S. at this point. So I'm going to share my screen and a couple of diagrams that might help sort of set the stage, and then feel free to ask questions. Landon, I may have to look to you to ask me the questions since I won't be following the chat very closely.
Sure.
Okay, let's go with that. You let me know if you can see that.
Looks good. I didn't realize you were, and this is good.
All right, I just swapped to another one. Hopefully that shows up well for you.
Yep.
Okay, should say planning or action problem.
Yep.
Okay, this is a slide I shared with the city council a little while ago. There's been a lot of questions about 3 years in a row why there seems to be a crisis every winter for overflow, which is a legitimate question, and I can understand that completely. This slide talked about the planning and action stages and why we run into this consistently. So on the left, you'll see at the top left is an oval that says State Homelessness Council. That is a new entity as of this year that replaced a previous one that was essentially pretty close to the same concept, where on a state level, there's a council of individuals that meets to form a statewide plan to address homelessness. That's made up of a lot of folks, but essentially the state has that entity that should be responsible to the legislature and the governor and all of us about addressing homelessness across the entire state. They break the state into a lot of different regions. So there's 13 different areas that each are now they call them a local homelessness council. And each area should come up with plans for its region and submit those to the state, a plan essentially, and typically a budget attached to that plan. Now, it doesn't mean they have the money for it. And that's really where the state should be stepping in to help coordinate budget needs at that level for each local entity. Locally, our county, essentially, the Salt Lake Valley, is one region for that. The largest one by number and by a lot of metrics, but it's led by the Salt Lake Valley Coalition to End Homelessness, which serves as the local entity made up of volunteers to form a plan for this valley. And you can see some of the folks in the box there, that gray box, who are part of this, but regular folks who have no other interest in homelessness other than they're citizens of the area or business owners, folks who have experienced or are currently experiencing homelessness. Everybody can be a part of that group. There's no qualifications other than you have some interest in doing so. Now they coordinate. You see the next box to the right, the kind of brown one above planning. That's core function or task groups. The coalition breaks itself into all these different areas because there's so many areas to look at homelessness from. So they've got different groups that meet regularly, a client-focused one, community engagement, crisis response, which is where emergency shelter lies. That group really handles that need. Education, employment, health, wellness, housing, legal rights. And then within some of these, there's even smaller subgroups looking at very specific issues. So it tries to be very comprehensive and form a plan every year, and they have for the last at least 2 years, 3 years probably now. Now, to the right of that, there's a question mark in that next arrow to the action section. And the reason there's a question mark there is because in the current system, there is a breakdown there at times. Because if you look at in that kind of reddish box, operations money, that means federal, state, city, county, capital money, which is building buildings or renting buildings for the wintertime. And right now that comes through federal stimulus money, previous stimulus money, state, city, county monies. And then also there's a land use regulation issue, and that's a cities related issue. So this year, when the coalition had a plan to have, to try and purchase motels, at least one, to use for emergency shelter and or housing going forward, that required whatever city the hotel was listed in or motel was in to allow that based on their zoning. And you can see the coalition doesn't control the zoning. They don't control the state monies. So really they can plan all they want and work at this, but if they don't get support from these other entities, we run into the same problem we've had 3 years running now. And so it's one of those systems that I'm not sure anybody wants it to fail or to have crises like this, but it ends up having them consistently. And we need to do a lot more work statewide and locally about why there's that breakdown between the planning and action. And part of this is probably going to be systemic going forward, because I'm not sure how much anybody wants to supersede local zoning. But it's clearly a discussion we need to talk about. We need to talk at a state level about a formal state budget for homelessness, which hasn't really been there in that way before. There's been a lot of money passing through and some processes to allocate it. But there's far more need than the actual funding. And so there's a lot of discussion at this to be at the state legislature to talk through local counties and cities about how everybody contributes to this rather than a handful of cities across the state. So that might set the stage for the system itself, that there is planning happening, but the action lags sometimes. I'm going to go to a different slide now. This is about Salt Lake Valley particularly. It says homelessness in the Salt Lake Valley. Can you see that one?
Mhm.
I may need to zoom in a little bit at times for this to see it better, but this is my shorthand version, a very simplified version of how the valley works right now. Okay, you'll see the diagram, the icons in the middle of the screen right now colored. Top is housing. To the right hand side, you see yellow and shelter, red unsheltered. The bottom is the jail. Courts to the left in purple, treatment to the upper left in blue. And then on the outside, and then the arrow sort of talking about where movement sometimes goes with folks in this system. Again, this is very simplified, so it doesn't mean that's the only way movement goes, but it gives a starting point. And then on the outside here in those boxes, there's a lot of words and details that I can go through to help understand this a little bit. If you just look at the icons first, bottom right, the unsheltered in red, that tent. We talk a lot about unsheltered homelessness right now. It's actually the minority of folks who are experiencing homelessness, but it's the most visible, obviously. And so oftentimes folks go up into shelter. Now, we don't have enough shelter beds. That's why we run into this 300 bed deficit every year, at least for the last 3 years since the old road home downtown had to close. But then from shelter, theoretically, should move up to housing. Now, on the bottom right, if you go from the unsheltered, sometimes we talk about folks who don't want to go into shelter or don't want services or have criminal issues going on or are causing crimes. Now, I don't think that's the majority of folks, but there is a way into the jail system, obviously, and into the court system on the left. And from the courts, oftentimes, that's where a lot of folks will go into treatment. And this is not unique to folks who are experiencing homelessness. I used to be a therapist in an outpatient clinic, and almost everybody that I saw was mandated into treatment in some capacity, generally through a judge. But it's not always that likely that somebody just voluntarily comes forward and says, I really want help. Sometimes it is one more charge that helps them move into it, or a family member that lays down an ultimatum, or a spouse or somebody like that. But there's usually some other impetus to help somebody into and stay into treatment. So oftentimes the courts are one way into treatment if the courts function that way, right? And that's why we have drug court and mental health court and homeless court. We also have a lot of work being done locally in our district and our justice courts in Salt Lake City to help folks who are in the resource centers get access to take care of their charges sometimes or outstanding warrants, and also get treatment if they need it. And that's where from the shelter to the courts, there's that sort of long arrow going down. Now from treatment doesn't last forever. Sometimes it's residential, sometimes it's outpatient, but there's always a discharge place or a step down kind of process to that, which means there still needs to be housing at the top. And that's something that we sometimes miss, that generally all this comes back to housing sooner or later. Now you'll see, and there's some other arrows: sheltered to courts, unsheltered to courts, shelter into treatment. In the resource centers right now in Salt Lake and South Salt Lake, treatment providers come in and actually help folks get into treatment directly from those centers on a daily basis. So that is happening. If I zoom in a little bit, I'm going to start down at the unsheltered section here, in this area here, this box. Salt Lake City operates a community commitment program. Some of you may have heard about this, and I'm sure Tim has talked, or other folks have talked about this in the past. The city understands that there are impacts by folks who are unsheltered or camping outside, right? And so taking public safety and public cleaning and outreach services together to a program to try and address the impacts. It doesn't mean this is solving homelessness. It means that if there are public needs as far as cleanliness, folks camping for a long time causing other bio-waste issues or things like that, or just disruption to businesses or residences, the city is trying to help address that piece. And it's shifting over time a little bit, but that involves Advantage Services, which is a local cleaning company that hires a lot of folks who are formerly homeless or currently homeless sometimes. And they do a lot of the contracting to clean across the city. It also means that the county health department has a role to play with city services to clean up larger camps. What we're seeing more and more is that the more we've done this, and with Salt Lake City PD trying their best to help enforce the camping ordinance, we have fewer large camps, but we also have a lot more small camps, a couple of tents or a few folks at a time. And that also means we have distributed our services more widely, so it does make it a little harder to get to everywhere very quickly. So one of the things that is happening is the city is investing money to make sure we have more cleaning options and more folks who can go there on a daily basis to places. And that's just starting to get going so that we could respond more quickly than we've been able to in the past. Now, public safety is police, generally speaking. If your downtown is downtown Ambassadors, and it's actually been expanded to North Temple and the ballpark neighborhood as well, that can also be a piece of eyes on the ground who can call police or intervene themselves at times to help with public safety issues. And then the outreach services go along with this, where Volunteers of America, Utah, the Road Home has their own outreach teams around their resource center in South Salt Lake. We have outreach services that we try and deploy, even the police department at times, to offer services to folks who are outside camping, try and get them in as much as we can to indoor resources, or at least give them the option for other things they have needs of, right? It's not just clearing a camp. And we can go into a lot more detail about that process and camp abatements and cleanings and so forth. But the city is trying to address it that way, and it's a big lift. Now, that's a big operational lift. It's a big budget lift. So the next one down is cities received 3.4%, 7.2% of the state homelessness mitigation funds. The state, when they supported closure of the old shelter downtown to a dispersed model to at least 3 now in this valley, they set up a fund to help local cities offset the costs of that to them. Now, for a lot of reasons that we can't get into now tonight, Salt Lake City was not really a core piece of that. 60% of those funds immediately off the top go to South Salt Lake and Midvale every year. And the rest of the state's got to apply, including Salt Lake City, for the remainder of the funds, which means we've gotten a minuscule amount of the funds year over year. That is changing. Mayor Mendenhall has made a priority to talk about this everywhere she goes. And Wayne Niederhauser at the state, now the state coordinator, House and Senate leadership of the state, the governor's office, everyone is have had this discussed with them that needs to change. The fund needs to get bigger, number one. It's only about 6 million right now for the entire state. It's got to go at least 11 million minimum. And the allocation formula has got to change. We cannot be getting 3% of that fund for this city and taking on the role we have for a number of years now. We are investing a lot of city funds into this and not getting reimbursed from the state like other cities might be. Now, there's about 5 cities in the state who really are heavily impacted like this. None quite as much as we are, but those 5 are working together to advocate for a change to that system. The last piece here is the vehicle camping, and you probably have experienced this as well. This is not necessarily brand new to the United States. This goes back decades and decades. But along with unsheltered homelessness folks camping, in the last 2 years at least, it really has seemed to explode to a much larger level than we've seen previously. There are a lot of folks using vehicles to stay in. Now, it's a little more complex with them because technically speaking, there's some details in here, the federal government doesn't always recognize them as homeless through their definitions because they are in a vehicle which could be, if it's an RV per se, seen as housing. Now, we know realistically it's not true. Most of them aren't hooked up to utilities, to sewer, to water, et cetera, to heat. But there's a lot of complexity in there about how they're defined and how they self-define, because a lot of folks in vehicles don't identify as homeless necessarily. Oftentimes they're actually working, or a lot of folks who are in this situation are actually parking someplace legally within somebody's private property, and oftentimes trading services. They'll be the night watchman, or they'll work for a yard or for a company, and they'll allow them to stay there. So it gets interesting in that realm. We understand this is an issue. We're also addressing this through city compliance and the police department. And then the county is looking at this from a best practices perspective to see if there's a better alternative, because what we've talked about is that if the city were to open up, say, an RV park for folks someplace in the city on city land, right? A lot of the vehicles we're seeing are older, and that's why they can't go into, say, a KOA, because there's an age restriction on there. And a lot of them actually have no way to move themselves independently. We've got a lot of fifth wheels, essentially campers without trucks or without vehicles towing them. And one person will tow 5 or 10 of these around. And so if there's a place and they would park them, oftentimes they may break down eventually and they'll never move. It becomes a permanent KOA essentially. And probably a regional KOA, because there's a huge need, not just in our city, but the entire county and probably the state. And word gets out very quickly. You can see how this could balloon very fast. So it's a big issue, and we're trying to identify it or address it. Within the city, we have plans to help them move and follow the 48-hour ordinance or even sooner. And so we're deploying compliance and PD out at least once or twice a week now to try and give notice, make sure they're moving, so we don't get folks camping for a week or 2 weeks in the same place. It doesn't solve it, it moves it, but at least we're trying to address it so it's not set up for long-term impacts on a street. If you go to the left, the jail to the courts kind of section. One big piece of this is that a large number of folks we see outside camping or staying or disrupting businesses, oftentimes either in Sugar House Business District or downtown, are folks with severe mental illness and or a lot of substance use. And so one of the problems we've had is that they don't fit in jail very well. There's not housing for them. And it's difficult to force somebody into treatment for a lot of legal reasons. So one thing that is happening finally, the state has funded a receiving center in Salt Lake County, which is being built in South Salt Lake as we speak. It won't open until 2023, but that's a no denial receiving center so that police could pick somebody up who seems to be not in the right state of mind, disrupting traffic or pedestrian access or whatever it is, businesses, people. They could be taken to the receiving center where they can be stabilized and get right into treatment directly without going to jail necessarily. That's helpful because it saves police a lot of time. When police intervene in a situation and they arrest somebody for whatever reason, anything they've got is their personal property. They have to catalog it. So you can take an officer offline essentially for multiple hours or most of a day in these large camps, just cataloging stuff and getting everything moved and then move to jail and the paperwork involved in this. You can see how difficult it is for PD to intervene in some of these situations because we would lose them for hours and hours at a time. This would really help that process. Now, there would be some legal ramifications for somebody in that situation. If they didn't follow through on treatment options, there could be other consequences that could involve jail at some point. But really, trying to get them into treatment is the first step with medication and other supports. Now, between now and 2023, the county is trying to figure out how to bridge that gap. And we've had discussions with them on that, and that's ongoing. Some things in here about enhanced jail treatment or pre-discharge planning, talk with the DA's office, the Justice Court, and the county about misdemeanor level offenders. We have a plan for high-risk felony offenders, chronically offending folks, but nothing for misdemeanor folks, which is where a lot of the people we're talking about would fit. We're trying to figure out a way to get them into the right placement rather than just being even booked and released immediately from the jails or just cited and they stay on the street for multiple citations. Going up one to that, we just talked about that a little bit in the courts. If you move up to the left a little bit, treatment is a county specific enterprise. So the county funds treatment, whether mental health or substance use. And so there are some barriers to getting folks into mental health treatment, particularly, but also for substance use to some extent. Without some motivation at times, folks won't go in, and there are not enough beds anyway, either way. There are some beds right now for substance use, but not necessarily for mental health, especially inpatient. So that's got to keep being worked on. I'm a big fan of an ACT team, an ACT team, which is assertive community treatment, which is basically a mobile psychiatric hospital. I started one up at VOA years ago, and it provides all the services Medicaid funded to somebody to live in the community so that they're not isolated, not alone. The medications can come to them, help them get involved in activities, live pseudo-independently without having to go into treatment and live in a hospital per se, which is really expensive and they don't last very long in the hospitals regardless. So I like that model. I'd like to see that pursued some more. Those are discussions. Back to the right to the shelter. This will get us to where we are today or tonight. That yellow shelter, right now we need this year, based on the last 3 years of data, we need about 1,700 total shelter beds for the wintertime. We have been 300 short at least. Some of that is probably a holdover from the transition from one big shelter downtown at Rio Grande to multiple with hard caps on their occupancy rates. The one downtown for years and years could basically expand almost indefinitely. And they would have, for a building that was meant to have 400 plus people in there, they would have over 1,000 to almost 1,100 some nights over years in there. That can't happen in the current resource centers because there's a hard cap. So you can see why we have a gap per se that hasn't really been addressed. There were a lot of efforts to address it through more housing that just haven't been able to make the dent everyone hoped they would. So the overflow that's been cited this year on North Temple, again, is to address that for the wintertime. And their hope that'll open up within a few weeks this month. I'm going to cross my fingers on that. And that would really put a lot of emphasis on folks with high needs. We have a large aging population in the shelters and also on the streets. We have a lot of folks who have other disabilities and trying to make sure they're in there and anybody on the streets gets in who's unsheltered. But there's still an operational gap. And these numbers I'm putting forward here at the bottom, the Salt Lake Valley Coalition and Homelessness, those have changed slightly since I made this. But I just want to put that in there to know that the system is not fully funded. It never has been. Usually what happens is a provider, Road Home, VOA, Catholic Community Services, Switchpoint, whoever it is, they generally have to cut back services or just stretch whatever dollars they get to make it work to keep the doors open. And they do it consistently. But I want to make sure everyone understands that this system has never been fully funded. And that's where that state, Homelessness Council and state is really got to be a focus for us over and over again. Now, moving up, housing is ultimately sort of the end result for a lot of this with services. The Sully Valley Coalition and Homelessness has estimated in that top box that we need about 3,000 deeply affordable housing units this year. That means anybody making below 40% AMI, all the folks we're talking about in the homelessness system, we need, it's basically 2,950 beds right now, right? Units. And then each year next, 2022, 2023, 2024, they're estimating based on historical data that we're going to need another 1,400 every year above that. You get a sense that in 3 to 4 years, we have 7,000 beds we need essentially if we want everybody to have a place to live that's affordable for them. Massive number, right? Go below that, within that, we need about 450 permanent supportive housing units, really geared to folks who are severely mentally or severely physically ill, whether it's age-related or other things, who really won't be living independently on their own. They're not somebody who's going to sort of get clean and sober, get a job, back on their career kind of trajectory, make more money, move up in the housing ranks, those kind of things. These are folks who are generally going to have fixed incomes probably, and will stabilize perhaps, but not necessarily be independent. And right now there's a large number, I estimate about 15% of folks in the shelters right now, and probably a little higher on the streets, that would meet that criteria. And so we really need those units pretty quickly. And when we talk about all the deeply affordable housing ideas like hotel or motel conversions, purpose-built buildings like Pamela's place we built downtown, Magnolia opened this year downtown as well. Shared housing SROs, which there's an ordinance in front of the city council still, a holdover from earlier this year. And then the tiny home village you probably heard about that is right now being worked through on Indiana Avenue near 215 on the west side. All concepts about how to address this, and each of them probably have a place, but it's going to take a lot of these. And then the service money as well. Now, I don't say that to sort of frustrate folks and say it's impossible. Sometimes I get that reaction and I understand it. I'm still in my job. I'm still working in homelessness because I do believe we can make this happen. Probably I don't say that enough up front, but if we're going to make it happen, we have to confront the reality here. So I present this to everybody I can to say, we are closer than other cities in the Western United States by far. We are per capita have the lowest number of homeless individuals of anywhere in the Western US that I'm aware of right now. We're within reach. If you talk about 300 beds right now, just to get everybody inside, that is minuscule compared to almost anywhere else in the Western US. I mean, we all know about the West Coast and Seattle and San Francisco and San Diego, LA, et cetera. We're talking about tens and hundreds of thousands of people. Even Sacramento, California, that county has more homeless individuals unsheltered than our entire state. That alone. And we're not talking about Seattle we need 450 permanent supportive housing units. Just the city of Seattle estimates they need 6,000 of those. We are close to being able to address this if we choose to as a system. We haven't quite chosen yet, but at least we have the data in front of us now that we can advocate and see this is what we can do. There's a plan. It also means that the mayors worked very hard to straddle two kind of concepts. One is all of this is directly impacting Salt Lake City, and you all know that in a very profound way. It also means that the more the city does sometimes, the less other people need to do. And if we're going to get ahead of this, it's probably going to be the only real plan is probably to have a lot of folks together doing this, the coalition, the county as a whole, and cities, the state. If one city continues to do this, whether it's Ogden, Salt Lake City, St. George, whoever it is, we're probably always going to be behind, and we're never going to have the resource and the ability. And the cities that are doing it are going to continue to attract everybody there. They're going to be a regional hub. which means the more you do, the more you need to do. So she's tried very hard, in my estimation, to voice this need at a state level particularly, and a county level, to still take actions we talked about earlier to try and address the impact right now in the city, and work to get that coalition strong enough that they can get their plans into action and move some things outside of Salt Lake. Hasn't happened the way all of us would have hoped so far, but we've had more discussions than any other year with other cities in this county. We've had at least two cities come forward and offer and try and work with things, even though they didn't work out yet. That's an improvement. It's also an improvement to hear the state sort of listening to these and agree that there's some changes that need to be made. And Wayne Niederhauser, who's a new state coordinator, is a great addition to the state level. And he and I have worked a lot together in the last few months on this. So I'm optimistic, and I want to be realistic in looking at what we're facing. I don't know if that's too much at once. It sounds like hard to judge from online. It's a lot of information. I'm happy to take questions, Landon. I can also speak anytime offline or other days. I still have my same email address for my city council days at the city. So I'm always open to meeting with anybody individually or talking through with other groups, answering questions, whatever would be helpful.
Andrew, should we answer a few questions?
Yeah.
Okay. How about, what is the purpose of the proposed zoning text amendments related to homeless resource centers and homeless shelters?
Let's see. I'm going to try and get off of my full screen here. The zoning text amendment, the zoning text amendment was initiated by the mayor, Hold, and then it goes to the city council to make the changes, right? So right now, planning is taking this into kind of a phased approach. The first phase, the mayor's intent was to say, we have to be more strategic and careful in how we're addressing emergency shelter operations in the city. Because right now, anybody could apply for a temporary or permanent conditional use for that use in certain zones in the city. And with conditional use processes, it's not a guarantee, but once you follow the rules, you can get it, right? And so there was a little less control from the city, and to say we could keep citing these in places in the city or in the city in general, we may not feel comfortable with them. So the idea was to get 6 months when she put that forward to work on it. Part of it was rewriting the current code and pulling out the conditional use as it was written now, differentiating between permanent and temporary. So that means that the permanent was a hold right now. The temporary allowed Salt Lake Valley Coalition and Shelter the Homeless to apply for the North Temple one, which they wasn't a conditional use, but they could have applied for that somewhere else in the city. And then in the meantime, have discussions at the council level and the mayor's office and planning about how does the city want to write this to have more control over how that gets done in the city. So if somebody wants to place an emergency shelter in the city someplace, the city has a little more control and a little more process with the neighborhoods about how that happens than in the past. There's a lot of complications in how that has happened this past year, but part of it is that somebody could apply and there was no requirement on them to go to the community before they applied. And once they applied, then it becomes public, but then it's already in the system, right? For a conditional use process. So it's difficult to even stop that. So there's a process piece and then an outcomes piece that are being worked on right now. I would anticipate that changing the current language will happen within this 6 months. I think it's already started. The second piece about what the new rules would be might take a little longer than 6 months, but I would hope this year it'd get done. That's just my personal hope.
Any idea how long the city will allow RV camping by homeless on neighborhood streets?
The current parking ordinance never really imagined people living in the vehicles. And so when compliance goes out to enforce the no parking, right, that 48-hour rule, it's complicated when somebody's in the vehicle because you can cite them, which they have done. If they don't move, generally it was you tow the vehicle, right? And there's a contract with a towing company. And so the towing companies, if it was unoccupied, some of these vehicles were very large and difficult, and they wouldn't make the money back by somebody getting it out of impound. So they have to eat the cost of the tow, the dismantling, getting rid of all the materials to the dump or other places places that needed to go, and they were losing money, so they just stopped. They wouldn't even tow some of the vehicles, even if they were unoccupied. And then towing somebody in a vehicle is problematic from a number of levels, as you can imagine. So the ordinance didn't work that well. What's happening right now is police are enforcing an ordinance about the public right of way, and sort of it's kind of like a nuisance on the public right of way. That doesn't require a 48-hour notice, but generally they're trying to give notice to folks so they can move on. We are trying to make that more regular, so at least once or twice a week we can address it across the city. The biggest one we have right now is out in the industrial area. It's massive. We've had up to 50, 60 vehicles in one place over the last year out there in different places as they move around. So we are trying to enforce that citywide. We meet every week with all the folks involved in this to identify the highest priorities and get people out them as soon as possible. We're sorry it hasn't been as quickly as we like at times, particularly for 1 or 2 vehicles, but we are trying. And so we need to know about them. If you have reports, use the app or call in, and we'll get to those as much as we possibly can.
What is the city's stance on harm reduction?
I'm not sure in relation to anything specific, or I don't know if it says anything. No.
No.
Harm reduction. I personally believe in harm reduction in a lot of situations, depending on what you mean here. Harm reduction basically means if it is difficult to stop a behavior by somebody else for a lot of legal and other reasons, how do you help them be safe until they can get to a place to stop? Oftentimes we talk about harm reduction in the context of drug and alcohol use, but it can mean a lot of different places. Part of the city right now trying to handle unsheltered camping or parking is sort of a harm reduction model of saying, we understand there's not enough beds indoors for everybody. And so we haven't taken the tact of other cities in this county of strict enforcement everywhere all the time and driving people physically out. We've also said you can't stay in one place very long. It causes a lot of problems. So when we do an abatement and a cleaning, it doesn't mean folks won't come back. It means we're trying to clean so it doesn't become a larger environmental hazard. But also recognizing that until this overflow can get in, it's going to be hard for folks to go anyplace because there's not a place to go. So it's a difficult balance we've been handling there. I'm not saying we're always exactly great in harm reduction versus not, but I think we're trying to find that balance right now and work really, really hard at more permanent solutions with all our partners.
Someone's asking for your contact info. If that's okay, if you could put that in the chat when you're done. Emily from Sugar House Coffee said, thanks for the info. It helped me understand some questions I had. The new shelters with their new model of services was supposed to provide better outcomes that was to compensate for the decreased number of beds from that provided by the road home. Has this new model of services failed to deliver as advertised? Are the new shelters providing the needed throughput?
That's a fundamental question to the whole system, right? I know I was on the council when a lot of promises were made. If you all were around for that and you remember this, but the site selection process of where the places would go. And the neighborhoods were told, we'll make that as low impact as possible. Make sure that they're integrated well and there's a move in, they're temporary, they move out to housing. That has not functioned the way I think any of us wanted it to, at least from my end. There's a couple reasons. One, I think we've run into a massive housing problem. I mean, I'm not sure that we forecast this 4 years ago, that not just the pandemic and the impact there on the economy, which when the economy goes down or struggles with jobs and incomes and those kind of things, a lot of things get worse with homelessness just in general over the decades. But when housing has been so unobtainable for folks, particularly if you're the lower end of the income spectrum, we have a massive shortage that there's no place to move into. And so, yeah, we get folks in the resource centers who might normally just self-resolve and get out pretty quickly. Generally, historically, about 60% of the folks coming into those centers would stay 1, 2, maybe 3 weeks max and never come back again. They would just find their own ways out. That hasn't happened to the same level we've seen in the past. And we haven't had a place for that population who are literally living there and probably will live there the rest of their lives if there are no other options to move out to, that permanent supportive housing. So there hasn't been a way to get out to the housing, not housing there yet. The second piece is there's not enough resources in the system necessarily still. I talked about them being underfunded. And that's been true. I set up one of the resource centers a few years back, and we had to cut the staffing just to make budget that first year. And we've sort of tried to backfill to get more case management and services, but it's difficult. We're also seeing that a small number of people who have severe mental illness or physical illness just takes so much disproportionate amount of time from staff members that it's hard to get to everything else. So that's where I talked about this whole system being here, that there was a lot of hope to get enough housing to move people out. And that hasn't really been realized in my view quite yet. I'm still hopeful we can, which is why I put those numbers up there. And that right now, the state legislative session this February, there will be at least one bill asking for $200 million towards this type of housing, which is a huge step. Traditionally, the state's put in $2 to $4 million per year towards housing statewide. It would be a massive step up, and it's needed badly. I also serve on the State Housing Affordability Commission, which has been trying to look at these things as well. So there is some movement there, but you're right. We've got to have more flow through into housing and other services. Otherwise, these centers are going to be full consistently, which they have been. And people are going to live there the rest of their lives, essentially, which is not what an emergency shelter should be in any way. Even a resource center shouldn't be that.
Awesome. Look, I don't see any more questions. If you want to hang around, maybe people will have some more in the chat, if that's okay with you.
Sure, I'll put my info in the chat now, and I'll be here for a bit. So.
Oh, Tim's all over it, so.
Tim, post all my personal information as well.
Cell phone, date of birth.
Great.
Can I
Yeah, go ahead, Amy.
respond a little bit? Hi, everybody. Sorry, new kitten. So I'm on kitten right now, but I just want to respond a little bit to the last question. Maybe a couple of questions. First off, I want to say thank you, Andrew. This information is always so incredibly helpful to me as a city council person. I believe to our administration, which is why the mayor stole you from the city council and put you where you're at, and to our constituents and our residents throughout Salt Lake City. One of the things I want to address real quickly that I was thinking about as I was listening was about the resource, the lack of resources. And one of the issues that we have is, even if we as a city are able to fund beds, we can't always find people to staff them. And Andrew, I'm sure, could talk a little bit more about that, but there is a staffing issue. We have to have, it's not just that people need a bed and they get to go sleep in that bed, but as we all know, there needs to be somebody there that is attentive to that person, especially with the vulnerable population that we see that are dealing with severe mental health issues or severe substance abuse issues, which Andrew has another wonderful presentation about the interplay between all of those. But it really is also about staffing. And so if any of you know anyone who wants to go into social work or wants an intern position, I think that the VOA would welcome them. The city would figure out a way to welcome them. Right? This is a really, we as a city council can appropriate money, but we can't tell where that money goes, right? And so we can say, we can have legislative intents on it. We can say this is what we're hoping for. But one of the big issues that we're seeing, and to be fair, we're seeing this through every industry, but we're seeing the impact is we don't have staff. We funded 13 social workers in our in the public safety area, and I think Jessica has found like 2 to hire or something, right? Like, people are not coming out, and we just don't have the staff. So we can have the best intentions possible, but we need people there that are like doing the work. And that is part of something that I want to make sure is also clear. And I'm like, we have given city raises. I think that we have good incentives, but it's also a really hard job. It's like deciding to be a public defender in my personal case, right? Like I took a 60% pay cut, and so that's also something that we have to be aware of, and that the toll that it takes on our social workers, the toll that it takes on the people that are there every day working. I've seen it. We've all seen it. Like, we just need to somehow figure out a way to encourage more people to be in those staffing positions. And it's a difficult, thankless, actually, I'm not going to say thankless. I think hopefully if you're there, it's a thankful job and you're doing it for that reason, right? But that is also part of the issues. The city council could put forth $3 million. And Andrew and I have had these conversations, right? We could put forth $3 million and say, let's build all of the things. If we don't have the staff there, if we don't have people there, then we don't necessarily also get to open or get to provide the resources that people need so that they're not still sleeping under the viaduct, right? So that's also something that I think we need to keep in mind. The other thing, and this was the last question that kind of got brought up about affordable housing, and it does go back to the staffing in some ways, but throughout my last 3.5, almost 4 years on the council, the RDA has made a huge impact on affordable housing. And we have, I think, and Andrew can correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the first developments that will go, what I like to call from zero to penthouse, on State Street, with the Brinshore development that's going down on, what is it, 212, I don't know, around there, State Street. We're going from permanent supportive housing to penthouse, all in one building, all in one development. And the reason that this is so important to me is to get rid of this stigma that people who are poor can't live with people who are rich, or people who have mental health issues can't live with people who don't. And by the way, maybe we all do. But this is one of the first developments that we are going to have in Salt Lake City as a zero to penthouse. And I'm excited to see where that goes, because we have put a lot of effort into it as a city, as an RDA, as a city council. And I think it can be a model for what we can do here in Sugar House and for what we can expect from developers. And it's something that comes to us that we were able to sort of expect that from the RDA in that area because we had an RDA project there. So we can put a little bit more demands on people and on developers because they're looking for an incentive, right? Here in Sugar House, we don't necessarily, well, number one, we don't have an RDA project area, so we don't have the same tools that we did with an RDA project area in that. But we still can put pressure on developers to look at what affordable housing is, and this idea, not just affordable, but attainable housing, and that you can have zero to penthouse developments. At least that's my opinion. And that, I don't think, Andrew, are you going to disagree with me on this? Because you can, but you better not. No, I'm just kidding. So I think we are, my point is, I think as a city, we are doing everything we can possibly think of to address the issue. Like outside of the box, inside of the box, all over the box, to address this issue because we have people in the positions that care about it and that are demanding for it. But it is really such, as Andrew pointed out, such a complicated issue that you have to look at it in so many facets. But I think, in all honesty, even though we may not see it right now, Salt Lake City is probably more innovative than any other city that I've been to or have talked to council members throughout the country about.
Yeah, a couple of details that might help to sort of frame what Amy's saying is, and some of the questions here about affordable housing. Our estimations in the city are that of this permanent supportive housing need in the state and the county, of that below 40% AMI with services attached to it, Salt Lake City currently has 74% of all those units in the city for the entire county. That means 3 out of every 4 of those are in our city compared to the rest of the county. We actually have 60% of them for the entire state in this city. We've done a great job in allocating $65 million in the last 6 years-ish towards affordable housing. But you can kind of see how this cycle gets really tight because the more you put in, the more it's here, the more services are here, the more people come here. And it's a never-ending cycle, right? Unless a lot of folks are doing this housing, it's going to continue potentially to be more and more concentrated in one city. And that's a difficult thing for this city to sort of manage in a lot of ways, right? So that is hard. There's a question there about how many affordable units have been built. I've got from the Salt Lake Valley Coalition a chart, probably not enough time, Landon, to do this, but essentially this year we were anticipating we needed about 3,000 units this year. We anticipated about 580 being created and about 110 being really focused on homelessness. 3,000 need, 580 being built, about 100 being ready for the homeless. Now it gets worse the next few years. I won't show you the slide because it'll depress you. But you can see we're not in a good trajectory. That's why we need more than one city, more than a couple cities to do this. It's got to be a statewide effort in a lot of ways. I think George brought up a couple points, Landon, quickly about state audits, which are important. There have been state audits since the beginning of the new shelter system, right, 3 years ago. Safety and security audits, which have pointed out some needs that the city's trying to address through more state funding to pay for it. We need more officers and more dedicated resources around those resource centers, and also a different working collaboration. If we have the resource to do that, both fire and police, we could do that. That's why this push for our state mitigation funds is huge for us. There's also a general homeless services audit, which the second phase was just released a few weeks ago. And a couple takeaways from that are, number one, a housing first approach seems to work. Over 90% of the people who move from the shelters into that type of housing stay in that housing long term. It's also incredibly expensive, which they bring up. And so to build that many more housing units like this is, in their view, perhaps prohibitively expensive. And they're advocating for more flow through of those, which if we had a longer discussion, we could talk through that. But there are audits happening to try and get the system to a place that's more efficient. And so I welcome those. And I know the providers are responding and the system's responding as we go along and getting better. And we've seen that in the safety security audits where 3 years ago it was a pretty difficult audit for the road home to sort of experience and for the homeless system to experience. And with multiple providers now, they acknowledge that it's getting better in each of those resource centers. So the trajectory is in the right path.
Well, thank you, Andrew. I think Bob Norgard is our new CIU officer, so he has to leave. So I'm going to unmute him real quick before he takes off. Is that okay? Thank you. All right, Bob, go ahead. I'm going to catch you before you go.
I was just right in the middle of typing the next paragraph. So
I know that was going to take forever.
yeah, I'll be really brief. So we're still having a big problem in Sugar House with car prowls. That's your vehicles being broken into and your belongings being stolen. So please don't leave your valuables out in plain sight, iPads, purses, anything. One case that caught my eye was a guy left his passport and $700 cash in his truck. And that was all taken. Another situation that's on the rise is folks leaving their garages open either by mistake or whatever, but people are just walking by, seeing the open garage, taking bikes, taking tools, taking anything they can just quickly grab and run. So try to be, diligent and make sure everything is all secured. Catalytic converter thefts are still becoming a problem. For some reason, Priuses are being targeted. So I don't know the significance behind that. I'm having trouble finding an answer to that. I'm also having trouble figuring out how to prevent catalytic converter thefts. It's not like you can weld a cover over it because they have to vent the heat out. So if anybody has any ideas for that, I am all ears. Other from that, I don't have anything else. Does anybody have any questions?
You mind putting your info in the chat for us?
Yep, absolutely.
All right, man. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Have a good night. All right, Leah, you want to talk road construction?
How about road design?
Okay, sure. All the same.
Great. Thank you.
I'm gonna unmute Lynn as well.
Can you unmute Lynn, and can you enable screen sharing for me? And I am literally about to present, and I'm gonna tell my daughter not to come in the room right now. Thank
Okay,
you.
I have kids too. It's okay.
She left me alone for the whole presentation until just this very moment. So, all right, I am gonna show you our Highland Drive workshop. Can you see my screen? Great. So today, Salt Lake City Transportation's 1100 East Highland Drive project team launched a virtual town hall online. I'll drop the link in the chat for you. These are a little different. The intent here is to put all the same information that we would have at an in-person open house, to put it online so people can take some time with it, look around, read the information, check the FAQs out, look at the designs, and then come to the open house and talk to us if they have questions or concerns or want to share comments. So I'm going to kind of walk you through it. When you come into the open house, it will look, it's meant to look just like a real open house. This project is, I think I've spoken with you all twice this fall about the Highland Drive project. It comes out of the local link study, which is looking at mobility between Sugar House, Mill Creek, Holiday areas. And really it's sort of motivated by the Funding Our Future bond, which dedicated funds to reconstruct the pavement in the roadway. So we decided Lynn Jacobs with Transportation is our project manager, and Lynn really wanted to make the most of the funding that we have, and also, make the most of the fact that the impacts will be difficult in Sugar House, right? It's a limited area. There's not a lot of room. There's a lot of businesses, a lot of traffic. So if we're going to do it, we want to do it once, we want to do it right. So our goal for the project is to build a safe, inviting, sustainable, and comfortable road from I-80 to about 17th South on Highland Drive 1100 East that provides transportation choices for a variety of users. So as you go through the site, you can kind of click on any of these images and they'll pop up, and you can zoom in and check them out, and then you can just scroll around. So here are some of the reasons behind the project. As you know, we've talked about, I think before, there are lots of really great full height street trees. We have businesses right up against the back of the sidewalk. This is kind of north of 21st South, like Soup Kitchen and what used to be the eyeglasses store that's now a tattoo shop over by T. Zanti, some of those folks, again, also by the post office. So we want to keep the character of the Sugar House Business District, but we are seeing a lot of pedestrians in the 21st South Highland Drive area, and we've had 2 fatalities in the last 5 years. So while the number of crashes, which is about 352, is not unusual for a road of this size and type, fatalities are really problematic and we want to avoid them. The other thing is there's a little gap of Parley's Trail that isn't connected, that we can connect as we go through on the south side of 2100 South over by Wilmington. That's Science Bank, Whole Foods, and the movie theater, that area. So we can make that connection and connect a really great trail system that's already existing. So as you go through the site, you can kind of see what the different designs look like. I've presented these to you before, so I'm not going to do it again. I know you have a lot of other people on the agenda, but I do want to just let you know you can see that. And you can also see these really cool renderings. So I'm just zooming in, and I'm on a touchpad, so I'm a little wonky, but it's giving me a hard time. I'm sorry. So this, I hope you can see it. This is actually our a rendering showing how we would widen the sidewalk. This is north of 21st South. You can see on the west side of the road, this is right by Sugar House Pub. There's both a sidewalk and a multi-use path. You can see a couple of cyclists there right by this little blue car with a park strip. This allows us to make some room for those trees, but it also allows us to provide a safe, comfortable place for bikes and scooters and some of those other non-motorized vehicles to be away from pedestrians, but also out of the travel lanes, and it shifts the parking all the way to the east side. So that's north of 21st South, and then the other section, this is here at Zion's Bank. You can see the lane striping is kind of pretty close to what exists today, and that's what we put in after the canal project this last summer. But you can see over on the west side, there's that connection of the Parley's Trail and a really nice wide multi-use path for cyclists and pedestrians. There's also, I don't know if you can see under all of these beautiful trees that we had this fall, but there is also a bike lane on the east side, which is the northbound side of the road. So there are a lot of things there. Those are just some renderings. You can see on this same exhibit, there are sort of the cross sections of how each section of road looks. As we go north from Ramona to Wilson, it doesn't change as much. So you can kind of zoom in and see. Sorry, again, this is easier when you have a regular mouse, not a touch screen. You can see what those cross sections look like. And then the last thing I wanted to just point out and let you know about is that the whole current design is here. So you can zoom in on the map all the way down to your house, your favorite coffee shop, the place where you go and do your volunteer work with the dogs and animals right at Best Friends. And you can see exactly how that's going to look in front of, you know, Sterling Furniture or over by Wells Fargo. You can zoom up and down and kind of take a look. And we would really encourage you to do that so that you can kind of understand what this might look like in front of you. And of course, we want to hear from you as well. So as you're on the site, you can click to leave your feedback. There's a form there. You can also click and add your contact information to get signed up for email updates. And then we are having a digital online open house on December 7th, which unfortunately is the same day as City Council. So we do want to encourage you to come if you can. The meeting is from 4 to 6. So we tried to stagger it towards the end of the workday for our businesses in the area, and then into the evening hours when residents are home. If you can't join us again, please feel free to leave your feedback. And if you want to just make a comment, go ahead. And if you want to make a comment and ask for a direct response, we'll be happy to respond to them if you provide your contact information. This project is in design. It is not scheduled to go to construction until 2023. So next year, we will be working more directly with the businesses to talk about how construction traffic might be phased, how to mitigate impacts during construction, some of the programs that the city has related to managing construction for businesses. Also the FAQs, we have had a couple of business and property owner workshops. We've also had a lot of one-on-ones with the businesses that are most directly impacted. And we have a lot of questions and answers based on the input that we've heard from the public so far. So definitely check that out as well. So I will stop sharing, and then I don't know, Landon, if there's questions in the chat you want to talk about tonight, or if I should just drop the links in the chat.
Yeah, if you want to drop the links in the chat. Lynn, do you want to address that question from Ben? But you're muted.
I've got the little inline
There
mute
you
button.
go.
My apologies. I see the question about when we investigate road improvements, how do we account for side street traffic? And specifically on 1100 East Highland, as we're redesigning and improving it, how does it impact 9th East and 13th East? And that's a really great question. As you can imagine, it is really difficult to try to predict how traffic will change, especially during construction as things, it's a lot of human psychology goes into that and people make individual choices. And it's really difficult to try to predict that. And so we know that there will be, especially during construction, there will be traffic that diverts to those other roadways. Unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do about it. It's just going to be part of the nature of getting through the construction. On this particular project, as we're rebuilding 11th East and Highland, when we are done, the roadway capacity, or in other words, how many cars we can actually move on this roadway, doesn't really change all that much. And so we're not really restricting traffic or changing the amount of flow that can happen on this roadway. And so we would expect that over time that traffic would just naturally come right back to the roadway as it has been in the past. Hopefully that answers the question.
Lynn, you want to go into your update as well? Hey, thanks,
You
Leah.
bet. Thanks, Leah. So I have an update and it's not on the S line. I think that's what's on the agenda. I don't have anything new to share from the
My
last
fault.
time I presented to you on that. That's fine. But I do want to, I need screen sharing though, Landon, if you don't mind making that a possibility for me. I did want to come and just share with you our 13th East project that we're just barely starting on. This is really early in the process. And so this is really everybody's first opportunity to start getting engaged with this project. And so I just wanted to take a minute and kind of make sure everybody knew what was going on with the project. Boy, can you see my, it should be the 13th East website.
Yeah.
Can everyone see that hopefully? I'll put the link to this in the chat when I'm done, but 13theastslc.com. So 13th East will be reconstructed after Highland Drive. So as we've been working, and Leah's been great to come the last couple of times and give us presentations on Highland Drive. As soon as we're done with building Highland Drive, the following year we shift and we look at 13th East. So we're now at the point where we're kicking off and starting to study and evaluate 13th East and start to look at what we need to do with this roadway when we rebuild it in 2024. And so it's kind of the next shoe to drop in the whole project. And so the city is launching an environmental and concept design for this project. And we're really looking between 21st South, and we're looking for our study all the way down to 33rd and Mill Creek. We don't currently have enough funding to build all the way to 33rd. Our funding ends somewhere right around the Mill Creek boundary. But as we're looking at the study, we want to think about how this roadway will function cohesively all the way to 33rd in front of Brickyard in that area down there. And so we are looking at that and making sure that we're accounting for that. And as we rebuild the road to the north, we're ready for it. So as you come and look at this website, there'll be details about all the previous studies that have been done, all the plans and what they recommend and what they suggest. And that's kind of where we're starting off from. But we're really at a point in the study where we want to hear from you, what issues you have on the roadway, what kind of problems people face. We want to make sure that we can address as many issues as we can when we're out there doing this. And so, like I said, it's really just trying to identify gaps in the network, trying to identify things that need to get improved, things that aren't working well, and trying to find solutions for that. And so if everyone could come to this website, you're going to notice that there's a spot for feedback. If you click on that feedback tab, there's a really brief survey that pops up, and it's really a simple form. It should only take about 5 to 10 minutes to fill out. And it's really just us looking for information about this roadway and how it works and what's working and what isn't. We're going to leave this survey open until January 5th. And so over the next month, we're going to be doing a lot of work to try to get people to know that this survey is open. And we wanted to strategically like not close it until after the holidays and after people are back from the holidays so that everyone has time to take it. And we also have time to get the word out. So to do that, we're here meeting with you tonight. We'd love for you guys to share this information with people and make sure everybody knows about it. We're sending out a bunch of postcards to all the residents in the area. And we're going to do social media blasts, and we're going to do everything we can to try to get the word out. But anything you can do to help is greatly appreciated. Again, this is for construction in 2024. So we are like 3 years out. And we're just trying to just get started so that we can figure out what we're doing and do it with plenty of time to spare. There is a place to get back to us and get updates. So you can fill out a form here. We also have this email address, info@13theeastslc.com. And then there's also a hotline number that people can call if they want to talk to someone. So that's the information, and just really look forward to hearing from everyone on this project, and we're excited to get going on it.
Hey, Lynn, there's a question in the chat about, is the right turn light on 13th and 21st, is it okay to turn right on red or wait till the light turns green?
Oh boy. I don't remember off the top of my head how we have that configured right now. If it says no right turn on red, then no. If it doesn't say that, then you should be allowed to make a right turn on red as long as it's clear to go. I can get a more specific answer if Yvonne, if you want to just email me with your contact info, I can get back to you after I've gone out and double checked what we have out there in place right now. I unfortunately don't remember every traffic control we have in the district, so I'd have to double check.
All right, thanks, Lynn. Thanks, guys. I'm gonna unmute Shri. Shri.
Hey, Landon, sorry, is that coming through now?
Yep, you're good.
Awesome. Thanks for unmuting me. I just want to give a couple updates on the Spring Branch Library. If you haven't stopped by recently, you should stop by, especially on the east side. We have some patio furniture and we have some pots that we're going to be filling with plants, and we're super excited about that. So the patio furniture, there was a delay in getting it because the money was coming out of this fiscal year and not last fiscal year. So that's why, but you should stop by and see that. And I found out today that we are planning in-person programming for February. So it's super exciting. We'll have story times again. It will be limited numbers with registration, but we're super excited to have invite everybody back to the library for in-person programming. And then we are also launching a adult reading challenge. So this is kind of like the 1,000 books before kindergarten, and some of the other reading challenges that we have for different age groups. We have an adult one that is coming out in early 2022. So we've got a lot of fun things planned, and we hope to see y'all at the library.
I can't wait to be back there.
Yeah, we're so excited. We want everybody to come back like right away, but we're watching the numbers really carefully. So yeah.
Well, thank you. Thanks for coming tonight.
Thanks, Landon.
All right, Councilwoman Fowler, you ready?
I am. Hi, everybody. I don't really have much of an update right now. We are going to hybrid meetings on December 7th. So there will be in person and virtual. If you do come in person, we are requiring a mask, and we are sticking very strictly to the requirement of a mask. So that's December 7th. Oath of office and all of that will take place on January 3rd. There is, trying to actually think of what's happening. We sort of slow down a little bit at the end of the year. So I know that it's not generally, I ask for question and answers, when we are in person, and I know that that's not the format we have, but if there's something in particular that somebody would like to know about, I'm happy to speak to that. I think that the real big issues that have been on everybody's mind really are about housing and our communities experiencing homelessness. And I appreciate Landon for having Andrew here and being able to give it a lot of really good information. And, you know, there are certainly things that we are trying to do, and I'm grateful for Andrew's input. It's kind of, we haven't had a council meeting for like 3 weeks. So I can't think of anything else right at this moment. Obviously, all of the construction that's been talked about, and you guys have seen my comments. I'm not happy with some of the things that have happened here on 900 East. And I hope that that is being conveyed. I think that we have to look at the fact that there are a bunch of rocks on one side of the street and a bunch of sod on the other side of the street, and how it affects our streets and our neighborhood and the ordinances. So it's something that I am looking into, along with the fact that we didn't actually look at our bus stops. We had an opportunity, I believe, to work with UTA to create a better bus stop. There's literally a bus stop across the street from my house, and it still is just a pole in rocks. And I don't think that that invites anyone to take public transportation, which we need people to be invited to take public transportation. So I've spoken with UTA about it. I'm being public about it here. I'm really not happy about some things. So I hope that as we continue looking at the future of Sugar House and these different developments and road constructions, that we actually will take into account the usability for us and our neighbors. So that's all I have. I wish everyone a wonderful holiday, and that's it. That's all I got, Landon. Unless you
It's December. It's just crazy. Thank you. We're just gonna do some quick community updates since we have a little bit of time. Judy, you want to talk about land use? You have to unmute yourself.
Okay. What's going on in land use? We seem to have 3 projects every single month. This Wednesday, December 8th, we have 3 items on the Planning Commission agenda. One is the fire station, the old fire station parcel rezone. Another one is the stealth wireless communications facilities. And then the third one is 1861 South, 1300 East. That's the building just south of Allen Park. And I have 19 pages of comments about that project. So it's going to be really interesting to see what's going to happen. The guys, I think he's asking for too many exceptions. And it's just right up against the edge of the park. So
Judy, what day is that meeting?
Wednesday, December 8th.
At what time?
5:30.
5:30?
Uh-huh.
And that's on your land use in December, right? What's the date for that?
Land use in December is December 13th. And I have an ADU at 2436 Park Street. And then I have the text amendment that Andrew was talking about. Text amendment for homeless resource centers and homeless centers. I'm not sure I totally understand it yet, but it sounds like it's prohibiting those in certain zones. So I think that's the conditional use process that he was talking about. And then there's a planned unit development. This is at 501, 511, and 515 East 27th South. That's where that old appliance repair store was on the corner. That brown one, it's been there forever. Never looks like it's open. And so somebody's going to redevelop that. It's in apartments and retail on the first floor. So that was a good.
Thank you. Sally, you want to do a parks update?
It's a little bit of a quiet time for the post committee. Obviously, as we go into fall and winter, I appreciate all the work that Sarah has done with the Friends of Fairmont Park. I did want to announce, the city announced that Troy Baker, who works for Salt Lake Public Lands, retired in December. So he's been with Public Lands for, I think, close to 30 years. So those of you who know him, we're going to really miss him. And so I wanted to announce that. And then probably lastly, I'll be keeping in close contact with the Urban Forestry Department regarding trees, because as you know, it's been really dry. We need some rain. And most of us have turned off our sprinkler systems or have quit watering our lawns. And as the winter goes on, that can be very detrimental to trees if we aren't getting snow. So kind of keep an eye on your trees, and I'll try to keep you all informed. They usually can kind of tell you if it's been so many weeks, depending on the diameter of your tree, how much water you actually should haul out there and put around your trees. And I lost half of a beautiful Japanese maple last year because I didn't realize it needed more water. And so we were lucky not to lose the whole tree, but we lost over half of it from lack of water. So I'll be keeping on top of that and try and keep you guys informed about those kinds of things. I think other than that, in the wintertime, we mostly spend time planning for the upcoming, spring season and summer. So Judy, did you have something you wanted to?
I wanted to say something about watering trees and plants like roses and things. What I've been doing since, we've been in this terrible drought, I keep a bucket in my shower. And the water goes in while the water's warming up, and then I turn it off, soak my body, and turn it back on to rinse my body. So what we're collecting a whole bucket, probably once a day or every other day. And then I haul it outside and I pick a plant. Of course.
Good God.
When it's July, well, stop it. 2 gallons of water in a bucket.
Yeah, a 2-gallon bucket is
just going to go in the sewer, so why shouldn't I put it on the plants?
And a 2-gallon bucket is what they recommend. I'm just not certain yet of, how often every 6 weeks or how often you need to do it. The trees do go somewhat dormant, but they need some water. So, and the roses.
Yeah.
We all learned something new. I'm going to unmute Lori Bray to talk about the Santa Shack.
Why, thank you.
You're welcome.
So those of you who don't know, the Santa Shack is alive and well, and it's 2275 South Highland Drive. So it's across the street from Patagonia, and we're doing everything outside again. Cute little fence, and we're open Monday through Friday from 3:30 to 7 and Saturdays 11 to 7. And I encourage all you adults to come. Judy and Wade have come a number of times with their dogs over the years. And we have a lot of people bring dogs. You can bring cats, you can bring birds. We've had all kinds of animals come, but we are outside, and because of COVID, and Santa is diabetic. I made him go have his antibodies checked yesterday, and they were good. So anyway, I hope to see you. It's been in Sugar House for 75 years, so we're trying to keep the tradition alive. And you can find information on Facebook and Instagram. And the really cool thing is, because I asked everybody if they've been there before, we have lots of new people coming this year. It's a really great location, and they're noticing that people from Park City, especially. So yay. and people from the new apartments. And so I've had a number of people come who say they just moved here from out of state, and I always take that opportunity to tell them about the community council and the art walk and things like that. So yay.
Lori, could you repeat those hours again for me?
You bet. Monday through Friday from 3:30 until 7. And Saturdays from 11 until 7. And the last day we're open is December 23rd.
And
Oh,
then,
and one other thing. So there's an artist in my building in Rockwood who has a daughter who does caricatures. So the caricatures are really fun. You can see those online. They're done digitally, and those have been really popular. So something new and different.
has anyone ever done a little bit of a photo collage of like the parents when they were kids being at the Santa Shack, and then now the kids and the, because 75 years, we
I
should
know.
have
I
generational.
so wish, but in the 1960s, when the Santa Shack was that octagon shaped shack on Monument Plaza, they didn't take pictures. So if anybody has pictures, they are their own personal ones. And I always ask, but that far back people don't have. But I have people who've sent me 20 years of pictures of their kids. And that's pretty remarkable. It's really fun to watch them grow up, and then to know they bring their kids and keep coming even though they're adults because their mom wants them to.
Lori, Will Coker went there as a kid.
Really, Will? Where's your picture? That's awesome. Well,
All right, well, thank you.
he's been as
We'll
an
all support
adult
you.
too. He came with his family.
Of course he did. Well, thank you. All right, Amy, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Sorry to interrupt one last time, but I did want to introduce, and I meant to do this earlier and I apologize. I did want to introduce our intern, Laura Stevens. Laura. Hi, Laura. So Laura is interning with us. She's going to be joining me here at our Sugar House Community Council meetings. And she takes notes and does an amazing summary of our meeting. So if anyone is ever interested in that, then we can certainly pass it on, the summary of the meeting. It's sort of like another minutes, if you will. But she shares it with the rest of the city council and with our staff. So if it's okay, Landon, can I give Laura just a little?
Yeah, of course.
And Laura, if it's okay with you that I put you on the spot to tell a little bit about yourself for our Sugar House community.
Yeah, I am a student at the University of Utah studying city planning. In my free time, I really like to read, draw. I enjoy to go swimming, water polo, hockey, in terms of athletics. I also enjoy playing on the PlayStation with like Spyro and Kingdom Hearts. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me.
And Laura, remind us what year in school you are. Are you a senior this year?
Yeah, I'm in my last year of my master's program. I'll be graduating May 5th and 6th.
In planning, and hopefully you will stay with Salt Lake City when you are done.
It's been really fun to work with Salt Lake.
Good. So this is your Sugar House community. And Laura's been wonderful for the last couple of months that we've virtually gotten to know each other, mostly via text and email. But I encourage people to reach out to both of us, and Laura is a wonderful asset to the community. And thank you for being with us, Laura, and choosing to intern with us.
Yeah, it's been really fun. I've been happy to help.
Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Thanks, Landon.
Well, there's a big Utah game on Friday, so go Utes, and meeting adjourned, and we'll see you in January. Thank you.